You're listening to Ecto Portal, a journey into the unknown with Anthony Anderson and Verna Wilson.
I hope that you are seated comfortably with the light turned down and the curtains drawn.
Once again to another journey into the unexplored, the unexplained Ecto Portal. I'm Anthony Anderson, your host, and I'm here with my co-host,
Verna Wilson.
And tonight we're going to present sort of a haunting, a possession, the Ammons haunting.
And what makes this case different is that it happened recently.
Yeah, most of our cases, our cases bounce around from all different decades and over the centuries, hundreds of years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and current. And this particular one, when was this from exactly?
2011, and I think it happened in Michigan. So if anybody lives in Michigan and they know about this case and they know about something that we haven't mentioned, we'd like to hear more.
That's right.
So this one begins with a woman and her 3 children. They claim to be possessed by demons. And this is about a 9-year-old boy walking backwards up a wall in the presence of a family case manager and a hospital nurse.
Wow, that's something.
Now, if a social worker saw that,
what are you feeding your kid?
I imagine they would probably think, okay, we have problems here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And Gary Police Captain Charles Austin said it was the strangest story that he ever heard.
Wow.
So I guess, wait a minute, Gary. So I guess that's Gary, Indiana?
It's Gary Police Department.
It's not Michigan. I'm sorry, folks. Wrong information.
Don't you remember? Gary, Indiana.
Gary, Indiana. I'm
Indiana,
sorry. Okay.
Say it once again.
My mistake. Okay. So Austin, who was a 36-year-old veteran of the Gary Police Department, said that he initially thought Indianapolis resident LATOYA AMMONS and her family made up a tale as a way to make money. But after several visits to their home and interviews with witnesses, he said simply, I think I'm a believer.
Wow.
Yeah. And not everyone who involved with the family was inclined to believe the story, and many readers will find that their claims were kind of impossible to accept. Although, in my opinion, who would make this up, right?
Exactly.
Right. So whatever the cause of the occurrences that happened with this family, whether they were deluded or it was demonic possession, it led to one of the most unusual cases ever handled by the Department of Child Services, and they have files on this, if that you can actually look up. So the events are detailed in nearly 800 pages of official records obtained by the Indianapolis Star and recounted in more than a dozen interviews with police, DCS personnel, psychologists, family members, and a Catholic priest. That's a lot of interviews.
That is a lot of interviews, and especially if a lot of those people are believers.
Yeah.
You think, what's up to this case?
Right, and probably most of them were skeptical to begin with. So Ammons, who swears by her story, and she's been very open about it, when she spoke on the condition that her children, spoke about it on condition that her children not be interviewed or named. So she was trying to protect them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. She signed releases letting the Star review medical, psychological, and official records that are not always open to the public.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's not flattering, and they probably don't want this known, and I can understand why she wouldn't want her children's names. She probably doesn't want this to follow the rest of their lives.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the family story is it made even more bizarre because it involves a DCS intervention and a string of
Department of Child Services.
Department of Child Services intervention, a string of psychological evaluations, a police investigation, and a series of exorcisms. So it involves that's a lot of drama.
Yeah. Exactly.
So anyway, the tale, they claims, started with flies. Flies. Yeah.
Okay.
And they said that that's what made them realize something was wrong. So this happened in November 2011. The family moved into a house on Carolina Street in Gary, a quiet lane that's with small one-story homes. And there were big black flies that suddenly swarmed their screened-in porch in December, despite the fact that it was winter and it was very cold.
Wow.
Gross. Sorry. Okay. So the mother claims, she said, this is not normal. She said, we killed them, but they kept coming back. And there were other strange things that occurred at the same time. Mm-hmm. After midnight, Campbell and Ammons both said that they occasionally heard the steady clump of footsteps climbing the basement stairs and the creak of the door opening between the basement and the kitchen, and nobody was there. And even after they locked the door, they continued to hear noise. So Campbell claims that she awoke one night and saw a shadowy figure of a man pacing her living room. She leaped out of bed to investigate and found large, wet boot prints.
That would freak me out.
That would freak me out, too.
Footprints of someone walking around in my house at night?
Yeah, and you saw a figure of a man, and then you see these big old boot prints.
Yeah.
So on March 10th, 2012, she said that the family's unease turned to fear. It was around 2 a.m., and normally Campbell, Ammons, and her children would have been asleep, but they were mourning the death of a loved one with a group of friends. So Ammons, who was in Campbell's bedroom, startled everyone by screaming, "Mama, Mama," like a child would do. Mm-hmm. And Campbell said that when she ran into the bedroom where her then 12-year-old granddaughter and a friend were staying, she said that the 12-year-old was levitating above the bed, unconscious.
Okay, that's not
that would be
unusual at all.
That would freak me out too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Seeing your 12-year-old. Yeah. So according to their account of events, Ammons and several others surrounded the girl praying, and Campbell said that she remembered being very terrified. Well, who wouldn't be?
Yeah.
And she thought, what's going on? Why is this happening? So eventually Campbell said that her granddaughter descended into the bed, and the girl woke up with no memory of what happened.
Weird.
Yeah, that is. So Campbell and Ammons said that the people who kept visiting that night, who were actually visiting that very night, they refused to return to the house. And so they must have been freaked. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So LATOYA Ammons talks also about demon possession that tormented her and her children. And Campbell said that she remembered telling her daughter, "We need help. We need to talk to someone who knows how to deal with it." And Campbell and Ammons claimed that they didn't know exactly what it was, but they believed that something supernatural was haunting the whole place, and it was something wrong.
Well, I guess that would be harder, because if you had a fly problem and then you had levitation, you had an apparition in your living room leaving footsteps of wet boot prints, mm-hmm. That's kind of hard to pinpoint on what exactly are we dealing with.
Right. And I bet you anything there's even more than that they really weren't.
Oh, I'm sure.
That didn't make it into the story.
Yep.
Right. So they called some local churches, but most of the churches refused to listen, which I think was wrong.
Churches I notice they go one of two ways. They go with, you're totally bonkers, you need psychiatric help, mm-hmm. You're making stuff up, the church doesn't deal with it, you need to tell your local medical professional. Mm-hmm. Or they're, oh my God, you're completely controlled by demons, let's have all the priests go into your house, let's save you. It's one or the other. They don't have any, let's try this and see if it works. If not, they are either one extreme or the other. Do you ever notice that when you read
I do notice that, but that's one of the reasons why I think the Catholic Church is more bound to listen, because their priests are actually trained in exorcism.
Yeah.
So they would be more bound to listen than another denomination.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
More experience, I think, with that kind of stuff.
Right. So eventually, after listening to Campbell and Ammons talk about the house and visiting it, officials at one church told them that the Carolina Street house had spirits in it, and they recommended that the family clean the home with bleach and ammonia and then use oil to draw crosses on every door and window. At the church's suggestion, Ammons said that she poured olive oil on her 3 children's hands and feet and then smeared oil in the shape of crosses on their forehead. So Campbell and Ammons also told the Star that they reached out to 2 clairvoyants who said that the family's home was besieged by more than 200 demons.
Wow.
How did they figure out 200 demons?
Yeah, why not 199?
Yeah. How did they come up with that number?
Is there like a demon counter?
I mean, I understand the sensing demon presence, but how do they count? But anyway.
And how do they know they're demons? And
Right.
they're not just apparitions. And there's 200. So do you have 200 different names of these demons? I don't know. I don't know how these people.
Yeah, I don't know how they figured that one out. But
There's a lot
anyway,
of guessing in there.
their explanation seemed to make sense to these 2 people, Campbell and Ammons. They said because it meshed with their Christian faith. So it made sense to them anyway. Yeah. So they said the best thing you can do is move. But of course, that wasn't an option because they didn't have the money to move.
Right, which happens to a lot of people who are at these homes.
Right. So instead, Ammons said that she took a clairvoyant's advice and made an altar in the basement. So she covered an end table with a white sheet. She placed a white candle, a statue of Mary, Joseph, and Jesus on it, and she opened a Bible to Psalms 91. And she said she and another person donned with white T-shirts and wound white scarves around their heads. And they burned sage and sulfur throughout the house, starting upstairs, working their way down. They said the smoke was so thick they could hardly breathe, which that would make sense, burning the sage. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what you do when you want to clear the air.
Yep.
So she drew a cross with the smoke, and the person she was with read Psalms 91 aloud while they moved through the house, burning the smoke.
Right.
Yeah. And she's, and so she said that nothing happened for 3 days, and then after that, things got worse. So the family claims that demons possess Ammons and their children, 7, 9, and 12. The kids' eyes bulged. There were evil smiles across their face, and their voices deepened every time it happened. That would freak me out, seeing the kid's voice change to a deep voice.
Well, some of this reminds you of the Enfield haunting. Remember we did.
It does remind me of that. Yeah, I remember when we did that. Yeah.
Some of the traits remind me of that, but in that case they were dealing with one particular entity, not 200 demons, but
right. And this one, I guess they were doing it to all the kids in the family. Yeah. So anyway, Campbell said that the demons didn't affect her because she was born with protection from evil. She said she and others like her have a guardian who protects them. Ammons said that she felt weak, lightheaded, and warm when her body was possessed. Her body shook, and she felt out of control. And she said you could tell it's different, something supernatural. You know what it sounds like to me for her?
What?
It sounds like she's very clairvoyant and open herself.
Uh-huh.
And that
it's following her?
Well, no, but you know, a lot of people who are clairvoyant and who are very open, they're empaths, and they sense the energy and they feel it so much that they merge with that energy.
Uh-huh.
Who are empaths, and it sounds like she was an empath, and she was feeling the energy very strongly with that it sort of overtook her.
Well, maybe hereditary wise, her children have some of that as well.
Exactly, that's what I'm thinking about that. So the youngest boy, who was age 7, he sat in a closet talking to a boy that nobody else could see, and the other boy was describing what it felt like to be killed.
Weird.
Yeah. So Campbell said that the 7-year-old once flew out of the bathroom as if he'd been thrown out of there, and a headboard once smacked into her daughter, causing a wound that needed stitches.
Wow.
Ouch. That would have been enough for me to say, okay, let's start saving our money.
Let's get out of here.
Yeah. The 12-year-old would later tell mental health professionals that she sometimes felt as if she were being choked and held down so that she couldn't speak or move. She said that she heard a voice say that she'd never see her family again and wouldn't live another 20 minutes.
Wow.
No wonder Child Protective Services got involved.
Yeah, can you imagine what, on their end, hearing all this, like, what is going on in that house? We have to figure out what's going on.
Right, especially with children involved.
Yep.
And they said that some nights were so bad that the family slept at a hotel. So finally, in desperation, they went to their family physician. His name was Dr. Jeffrey Onakue, and this was on April 19th, 2012. And Ammon says she told him what they were going through, hoping that he'd understand. But he told the Star, which was the paper, that it was really bizarre. 20 years, I've never heard anything like that in my life. I was scared myself when I walked into the room. So there must have been some kind of weird atmosphere when he walked in. Yeah. He said that he wouldn't speak in more detail unless Ammons had psychiatric clearance for a waiver of confidentiality that she signed. And of course, I can understand why he would. In his medical notes about the visit, he wrote delusions of a ghost in the home and hallucinations. He also wrote history of ghosts at home and delusional. So to him,
that was his perception.
Yeah, his perception, yeah. Now, what Ammons and Campbell say happened next also was detailed in a DCS report of a family case manager's interviews with the medical staff, and which was chaos erupted. He walked up the wall, flipped over her, and stood there. That would freak me out. Can you imagine walking up the wall, flipping over, and then just standing there? No. Campbell said that Ammon's sons cursed Onakue in the demonic voices raging at him. Medical staff said the youngest boy was lifted and thrown onto the wall with nobody touching him, according to the report. So they said that Rosa Campbell stands with her Bible at her Indianapolis home on August 23rd, 2013. She often reads the Bible to combat the demons possessing her daughter and grandchildren. So this was going on all the way to 2013.
And that was her answer of how to deal with it, I think.
Right. So the boys passed out and wouldn't come to, which is sad. And Campbell added that she cradled one boy in her arms and Ammons held the other. Someone from the doctor's office called 911. And Onakue said that 7 or 8 police officers and multiple ambulances showed up. That's a lot of drama.
Yeah.
Everybody they couldn't figure out what was happening. Police and emergency personnel took the boys to Methodist Hospital campus in Gary. And Ammon said that the hospital personnel laughed at her desire to anoint her sons in olive oil. She said, I couldn't talk to them, so I talked to God. And the boys woke up in the hospital. The older boy, then age 9, acted rationally, but the youngest screamed and thrashed. And it took 5 men to hold him down.
Wow. 5 men for a little kid.
For a little kid, yeah. So someone called the Child Protective Services again. They called DCS and asked that the agency to investigate Ammons for possible child abuse or neglect. And I can understand why they would, because if you don't understand, you wonder what's going on with these kids. Yeah. So the caller, who was not named in the report, speculated that Ammons might have a mental illness. The person believed that the children were performing for Ammons and that she was encouraging their behavior. And the case manager, Valerie Washington, was asked to handle the investigation. She gave the account to police, and this is her intake in the officer's report. The hospital personnel examined Ammons and her children and found them to be healthy and free of marks or bruises. A hospital psychiatrist evaluated Ammons and determined that she was of sound mind, so they found nothing wrong with them. Mm-hmm. And Washington interviewed the family in the hospital. When she spoke with Ammons, the 7-year-old boy started growling with his teeth showing and his eyes rolled in the back of his head. And the boys locked his hands around his older brother's throat and refused to let go until the adults pried his hands open. That would freak me out.
Yeah, that's disturbing.
Right. So later that evening, Washington and registered nurse Willie Lee brought the 2 boys into a small exam room for an interview, and Campbell joined them.
The 7-year-old stared into his brother's eyes and began to growl again.
Yikes.
It's time to die, the boy said in a deep, unnatural voice. I will kill you. While the youngest boy spoke, the older brother started headbutting Campbell in the stomach. Campbell grabbed her grandson's hands and started praying, and what happened next would rattle the witnesses so that some of it would offer not only evidence but proof of paranormal activity. And according to the Washington's original Child Protective Services report, an account corroborated by Walker, the nurse, the 9-year-old had a weird grin and walked backwards up the wall to the ceiling. He flipped over Campbell, landing on his feet, and he never let go of his grandmother's hand. He's walked up the wall, flipped over, and stood there, Walker told the Star. There's no way he could have done that. Later, police asked Washington whether the boy had run up the wall as though performing an acrobatic trick. No, Washington told them. She said the boy glided backward on the floor, wall, and ceiling, according to the police report.
He did that several times. I mean, can you imagine that?
Now, Washington did not respond to the Star's request for comment, but she told police she was scared what had happened and ran out of the room. And as for Walker, Washington said he ran out of the room with me. We didn't know what was going on, Walker told the Star. That was crazy. I was like, everybody gotta go. According to Washington's report, they told the doctor what happened. The doctor, who did not believe them, asked the boy to walk up the wall again. Walker said he told the doctor he doubted the boy could repeat the feat. This kid was not himself when he did that, Walker said. The boy said he didn't remember what happened and couldn't do it, according to Washington's report. Walker, who said he previously believed in demons and spirits, thought the boy's behavior had some demonic spirit to it, but also was the result of mental illness. Police report quoted Washington saying she believed there could be an evil influence affecting the family. Now, Ammons said she spent the night at the hospital with her 7-year-old son, while Campbell took Ammons' daughter and older son to the relative's home in Gary. The next day was Ammons' youngest son's 8th birthday. Ammons said that the Child Protective Service officials asked Campbell to bring the older children back to the hospital, presumably to talk more about what happened. Now, the family celebrated the boy's birthday by singing and eating a miniature cake. Then Ammons said Washington told them that the children wouldn't be going home. Child Protective Services took the emergency step of taking custody of the children without a court order. All the children were experiencing spiritual and emotional distress, Washington told Child Protective Services on the form. Ammons told the Star she and her children cried because they didn't want to be separated.
That's sad.
We'd already been through so much and fought so hard for our lives, she recalled. It's obvious we were a team and we were beating it. Whatever we were fighting, we made it through together as a team, and they separated us. Now, the Reverend Michael Magno was leading a Bible study in his living room the morning of April 20th, 2012, when he received a call from a hospital chaplain. Magno had been the priest at St. Stephen Martyr Parish in Merrillville for more than 10 years, but had never received a request like this one. The chaplain asked him to perform an exorcism on Ammons' 9-year-old son. Magno agreed to the interview, the family, after Sunday's Mass a few days later. The first step, Magno said, was ruling out natural causes for what the Ammons and her family what they were experiencing. He visited Ammons and Campbell in the Carolina Street home on April 22nd, 2012 for 2 hours. Ammons and Campbell detailed the phenomenon for him. Then Campbell interrupted the interview to point out a flickering bathroom light. Then flickering stopped each time Magno walked over to investigate it, while he attributed it to a demonic presence. It must be afraid of me, he told the Star later. The interview was interrupted again when Campbell pointed out Venetian blinds in the kitchen swinging, even though there was no air current. Magno said he also saw wet footprints throughout the living room, which they mentioned earlier.
Those footprints again.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Ammons complained about having a headache. Magno said she convulsed when he placed a crucifix against her head. After a 4-hour interview, Magno said he was convinced the family was being tormented by demons. He said also believed there were ghosts in the house. Magno blessed the house before he left, praying and reading from the Bible and sprinkling holy water in each room. And he told Ammons and Campbell to leave because it wasn't safe. They temporarily moved in with a relative.
Now, less than a week later, the two women were back on Carolina Street to let Washington, the Child Protective Services family case manager, also to check the condition of the home, and Washington asked a Lake County police officer to come with her. So 2 other officers, one each from Gary and Hammond police departments, asked to join them out of professional curiosity. Now, Ammons refused to go inside, but Campbell agreed to accompany the group, and Ammons' kids were still in child protective custody. So the main floor had 3 bedrooms, a living room, 1 bathroom, a hardwood floor, and a small open-style kitchen. Sounds like a nice house, actually. Mm-hmm. A door in a kitchen led to a basement with concrete floors. Directly under the stairs was a dirt floor. The concrete around it was jagged, although as if it had been broken. So the makeshift altar that Ammons created was still in place, along with rings of salt that she poured against the basement walls to dissuade the demons, according to a Hammond police report. Campbell told the officers that demons seemed to come from beneath the stairs. Apparently, that's where they were coming from. So Austin, the Gary police captain, was one of those officers, and he told later the Star that he believed that ghosts and the supernatural, but he didn't believe in demons.
Interesting. Now, Austin said he changed his mind after visiting the Carolina Street house. During the interview with Campbell, one of the officer's audio recorders malfunctioned, according to Austin and Hammond police records. The power light flashed to indicate the batteries were dying, even though the officer had placed fresh batteries in the recorder earlier that day. Now, another officer recorded audio, and when he played it back later, he heard an unknown voice whisper, "Hey," according to Lake County police records.
Ew.
Now, that officer took photos of the house, and in one photo of the basement stairs, there was a cloudy white image in the upper right-hand corner. When an officer enlarged the photo, the cloud appeared to resemble a face. Lake County police records stated the enlargement also revealed a second green image that police say looked like a female. Austin said the photos he snapped with his iPhone also seemed to have strange silhouettes in them. The radio in his police-issued Ford malfunctioned on the way home. Later, Austin said the garage at his Gary home refused to open, even though the power was on everywhere else. Austin said the driver's seat in his personal 2005 Infiniti also started moving backwards and forward on its own. He said he had the car checked at the dealership, and the mechanic told him that the motor on the driver's seat was broken, while the mechanic said could have caused a distraction leading to an accident.
Yikes.
Austin said he found himself stating and starting to believe Ammons' claims of paranormal activity, but the mental health professionals evaluating Ammons and her children remained skeptical.
In April 2012, Child Protective Services petitioned Lake Juvenile Court for temporary wardship of 3 children, and the request was granted. Child Protective Services found that Ammons neglected her children's education by not having them in school on a regular basis. The agency made the same finding in 2009, the records show. You know, I was wondering about that. I was thinking, how do they go about their normal lives, and how do these kids manage to go to school?
So she's not keeping them in school this whole time.
That was on my mind while reading this.
That's a little weird, too.
Yeah, that is weird. So Ammons told Washington that there were times she couldn't send the kids to school because the spirits would make them sick or they would be up all night without sleep. So Child Protective Services temporarily placed her daughter and older son in St. Joseph's Carmelite home in East Chicago. Ammons' youngest son was sent to Christian Haven Wheatfield for a psychiatric evaluation. Clinical psychologist Stacy Wright, who evaluated Ammons' youngest son, said that the boy tended to act possessed when he was challenged, redirected, or asked questions that he didn't want to answer. In her evaluation, Wright wrote that he seemed coherent and logical except when he talked about demons. Rosa Campbell talks about the experience with demons that she and her daughter and grandchildren lived through on August 23rd, 2013. And it was then that the 8-year-old's stories became bizarre, fragmented, and illogical, Wright said. His stories change every time he told them. But then he was only 8 years old. He was probably just trying to figure all this out.
Yeah,
He also changed the subject, quizzing Wright on math problems and asked her about outer space. Can you die if you go to space? How do you get to space? Do you have to wear helmet and suit? Wright believed that the 8-year-old did not suffer from a true psychotic disorder. This appears to be an unfortunate and sad case of a child who's been induced into a delusional system perpetuated by his mother and potentially reinforced by other relatives, she wrote in her psychological evaluation. Clinical psychologist Joel Schwartz, who evaluated Ammons' daughter and her older son, also came to a similar conclusion. There appears to be a need to access the extent to which they may have been unduly influenced by the mother's concerns that the family was exposed to paranormal experiences. And the daughter told Schwartz that she saw shadowy figures in the Carolina Street home, which, of course, goes along with what everybody else was saying.
Yeah.
She also said twice that she went into trances. Ammon's older son told Schwartz that doors would slam and stuff started moving around. Ammons was also examined several times by psychologists who said that she was guarded but did not seem to be experiencing symptoms of psychosis or thought disorder. One psychologist recommended Ammons be assessed to determine whether her religious beliefs may be masking underlying delusional ideations or perceptual disturbances. And Ammons and all three kids continued to insist that they were possessed by demons. So Child Protective Services did set goals for the family. One of them stipulated that the children need not discuss demons, being possessed, and take responsibility for their actions. They also need to participate in therapy to address past behavior. While Child Protective Services officials credited Ammons for sharing a close bond with her children, the agency said she needed to use alternate forms of discipline not directly related to religion and demon possession, according to the case plan. Appropriate discipline included encouragement rules and withholding privileges. She could also work on these goals during supervised visits with the children.
Yeah, to keep on track.
Yeah. Ammons also had to find a job and appropriate housing due to the paranormal activity to the house on Carolina Street. While Ammons was working on meeting those objectives, police and Child Protective Services continued to investigate the house, and the group was pretty large. This was a bit larger this time because it was a lot of people looking into that house. Yeah. So Campbell, Ammons, Austin, and two police officers from the initial visit went back to the Carolina Street home on May 10th, 2012, and the police officers visited after work hours. They were joined by Maganot, who was and two county officers with a police dog and a child protective family case manager, Samantha Illig, who was there in an official capacity, told the Star that she volunteered to go into Washington's place because Washington didn't want to go back into the house. So a county officer took his police dog around the home, but the dog didn't show any interest in any particular area, according to the police records. Everyone else headed into the basement. Illig touched some strange liquid that she saw dripping in the basement and said that it felt slippery yet sticky between her fingers. I wouldn't have touched that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yuck. So Maganot told police that he wanted to check the dirt under the stairs for a pentagram or personal objects that may have been cursed. He said a pentagram might indicate a demonic presence and possible portal to hell, according to a county police report. Or if someone died in the house and was buried under the stairs, it could explain the paranormal activity.
Assumption.
No, those are assumptions, of course.
Yeah, religious assumptions.
Right, so one of the police officers dug a 4-foot by 3-foot hole beneath the stairs, unearthing a pink press-on fingernail, a white pair of panties, a political shirt pin, a lid for a small cooking pan, socks with the bottoms cut off below the ankles, candy wrappers, and a heavy metal object that looked like a weight for a drapery cord. Sounds like it's just leftover stuff from the house.
Interesting.
Finding nothing else, the police officer replaced the dirt and raked over it. Maganot blessed some salt, which he said is a barrier to evil, and spread it under the stairs throughout the basement. Illig said that she was later standing in the living room with the rest of the group when her left pinky finger started to tingle and whiten. She complained it felt broken. Less than 10 minutes later, she said she felt as if she was having a panic attack. She couldn't breathe, so she walked outside to wait for the group. When the priest started questioning Ammons inside the house, she complained of a headache and shoulder pain, and according to the police records, she joined Illig outside. So Austin said that he felt that he left the house after nightfall, and he had been shot at and investigated. Austin, who is a veteran and who's been shot at and investigated murders, rape, and armed robberies, during his 3 decades on the force said that he wasn't staying at the house past dark.
That's someone who knows the difference.
Yeah, that is somebody who knows the difference. The other officers continued to walk through the house, and on the main floor, they noticed an oil-like substance dripping from the Venetian blinds in a bedroom, but they couldn't figure out where it was coming from. So to make sure that Campbell or Ammons hadn't poured oil on the blinds, 2 of the officers used paper towels to clean it off. The officers sealed the room for 25 minutes and stood nearby so no one could walk in. When they went back in, the oil reappeared according to the police records.
Weird.
Yeah, that's kooky.
It reminds me of the bleeding walls material that we did a show on, remember, about bleeding walls?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Different substances.
Mm-hmm. Now, Magano told police that the liquid was a manifestation of a paranormal or a demonic presence. He wrote a report detailing his findings, and he asked Bishop Dale Melsick's permission to perform an exorcism on Ammons. So Magano said that Melsick had never authorized an exorcism in 21 years as bishop of the Diocese of Gary. I knew it had to be Catholic Church to do that. Yeah.
Of course.
So Debbie Bosick, director of communications for the diocese, said that she cannot comment on whether Melsick has ever approved an exorcism for confidentiality reasons. But in general, she said that such an action would require a bishop's approval. So Melsick initially denied Magano's request to do a church-sanctioned exorcism. Magano said that the bishop told Magano to contact other priests who perform exorcisms. So Magano said that he needed other priests to give him the ritual for a minor exorcism, which does not require church approval. The priest he consulted told him to look it up on the internet. Oh boy, that's not helpful, isn't it?
I don't feel so safe anymore.
Gee. He said he did an intense blessing on the Carolina Street home to expel bad spirits. And that same day, Magano performed a minor exorcism on the Ammons. The ritual consisted of prayers, statements, and appeals to cast out demons. So 2 police officers and Illich, the family case manager, attended the ritual. And she says she felt that she left, Illich said that she left believing that something was going on, although she wouldn't go as far to say that it was demonic. She says she got chills during the near 2-hour rite. We felt like someone was in the room with you. Someone was breathing down your neck.
Interesting.
Yeah. So Illich said that she had a string of medical problems after visiting the home. A week after she visited the house for the last time, Illich says she got 3-degree burns from a motorcycle. And within 30 days, she also broke 3 ribs jet skiing, broke a hand while she hit a table, and then broke an ankle running in flip-flops.
Oh my God.
That's bad luck.
Yikes.
Yikes. I had friends who wouldn't talk to me because they believed something attached itself to me. Her joking response said, I'm already evil. They're trying to find something that's not evil and corrupt. They wouldn't waste their time on me. That's crazy.
Easy said than done.
Mm-hmm. So after the minor ritual, Magano told Ammons to look up the names of the demons that were tormenting her. Each demon had a name and personality, Magano said. Ammons said that she and a friend looked up the demons online by searching for demons that represented the problems the family's been having. The computer kept shutting down, and she says she felt sick and lightheaded. But she says she found names that fit. And one such name was Beelzebub, the Lord of the Flies. That would make sense since they have the flies, right? Yeah. Ammons said that they also found names of demons that torture and hurt kids, which she felt explained what happened in the Carolina Street house. Now, Ammons said that other high-ranking demons were also assigned to her, including lieutenants and sergeants. After the minor rite, Magano said that Bishop Melsick gave him permission to exorcise Ammons, and the ritual is the same as the minor exorcism, but more powerful because it has the backing of the Catholic Church. So Magano ultimately performed 3 major exorcisms on Ammons, 2 in English and the last one in Latin, in June 2012 at his Merrillville church. During each, Magano said that he praised God and condemned the demons, and he pressed a crucifix against her head as he spoke. I cast you out, unclean spirit, along with every other satanic power of the enemy, every specter from hell and all your fellow companions in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. That's what he said. So Magano said that his voice continued to get louder and more forceful until the demons weakened. He said he could tell how strong the demons were by how much Ammons convulsed. 2 police officers who kept in touch with Magano since the home investigation stood nearby in case Ammons needed to be restrained. And Ammons said that she prayed with Magano until it became too painful as well. She said she felt as if something inside of her was trying to hold on and inflict pain at the same time. She said it was different from a natural pain, but felt as intense as giving birth. I was hurting all over from the inside out. I was trying to do my best and be strong. Eventually, Magano said Ammons fell asleep. She said that was the demon's way of lessening the ritual's effect.
Now, in between the second and third exorcisms, Magano said he went on a retreat. A woman who assisted Magano with some of the exorcisms helped set up a backup plan in case Ammons had problems while Magano was gone. Now, the woman wrote a long demon name. Magano said he can't remember which one it was, and on a piece of paper and tucked it in an envelope. Then she surrounded it with blessed salt. If Ammons had problems, the woman would burn the envelope, Magano said. By this time, Ammons and her mother moved to Indianapolis, but they drove back for the exorcism and court hearings as her children were still in child services care. Magano said he blessed the family's new home to prevent more problems, but Ammons called while Magano was on retreat, complaining of bad dreams. So the woman burned the envelope. She saved the ashes to burn later in a church bonfire. After that, Ammons said her nightmares had ended. Now, in the final exorcism at the end of June 2012, Magano said he prayed and berated the demons in Latin rather than in English, and police officers did not attend. So Magano said his brother stood guard. Magano and Ammons convulsed while he condemned the demons but did not convulse during prayer. When she fell asleep, he said words of thanksgiving. It would be the last time Ammons saw Magano. She and her mother drove back to Indianapolis, where they say they now live without fear. Now, Ammons' old home on Carolina Street became an object of local curiosity. So much so that the owner and landlord, Charles Reed, called the Gary Police Department to ask officers to stop driving by the house because it was scaring his new tenant.
Wow.
Now, he said there were no problems in the home after Ammons and her family lived there. I thought I heard it all, said Reed, who was a landlord for 33 years. There's a new one on me. My belief system has a hard time jumping over that bridge. When told of the Catholic Church involvement in the situation, however, Reed said that made him less skeptical. Ammons regained custody of her 3 children in November 2012, about 6 months after they'd been removed. Now, Child Protective Services continued to check in on the children and make sure they were going to school, and until the case was closed last February. Now, Ammons called her children's return the happiest day of her life. She said they screamed and jumped up and down, and she picked them up from the the Department of Child Services officer in Gary. It was just awesome, she said. I hadn't been that happy in God knows how long. The children said they felt safe after they left the house on Carolina Street. The family said the 3 left their demonic voices and complaints behind them. No demonic presence or spirits in the home. And Child Services Family Case Manager Christina Olenjik wrote in team meeting notes dated January 10, 2013, she did not return calls from the Star seeking comment. The family is no longer fixated solely on religion to explain or cope with the children's behavior issues. The case manager wrote in a request for a dismissal of wardship. For her part, Ammons said it was not the psychologist who resolved her problems, but God. When you hear something like this, she said, don't assume it's not real because I've lived it. I know it's real.
I wonder why only that family was bothered, but the new tenant wasn't. What was going on?
That made me, as we've been going through this story, I started to think, I'm not so sold that there was demons in the house.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is the children weren't going to school, so they were always at home with mom as they were getting older and being raised. And she was obviously cited before for not having them go to school. When you're little, you want your mother's approval.
Right.
If you do something weird or angry or goofy or hurtful, and if she's really religious, she's going to say, oh, you're possessed by the devil. Don't do that. And then the kids notice whenever they act weird and stupid, she says, you're possessed by the devil. So they play along with it. I'm possessed by the devil, Mama. So, oh my God, you're possessed. I could see where they could feed into each other psychologically. And as you get older, this becomes normal routine.
So it was becoming part of their behavior.
Yeah. So they were psychologically maturing with this atmosphere of demonic possession, something's wrong in the house, mom's obsessed that something's wrong in the house. That doesn't mean there wasn't a paranormal experience going on in the house, but I think her being so religious, it just amplified it, and it also worked its way into the kids, and that fed back to her. And
if they were empaths and they were sucking the whole thing in, they were probably taking in too much of what was going on and letting it.
And that's assuming they're empath. We don't know that.
Just assuming. Well, you know, there is one part of the story that I thought about because of something that happened with a friend. There was a friend who was getting into mediumship. She wasn't a professional at it by any means.
Yeah.
She was getting into it, and she was constantly trying to call things up all the time. Constantly.
Just summoning, you mean?
Summoning all the time. Yeah, she was constantly trying to summon.
Okay.
I didn't think it was healthy for her, but every time I tried to dissuade her, she would tell me I was being closed-minded, and she would just shut me off. And then one day, you know how people like to sage to clean the atmosphere.
Yep.
One day she I bought some extra strong sage. It was for myself I bought it for. And she wanted to try it. And she said, well, this is extra strong. Can I try it? And I said, sure. So she lit it up and she tried it. And when she smudged herself, she got the shakes really bad. And
weird.
Yeah, she got
attached to her or something.
Something was attached to her. She got the shakes really bad. And she actually started shaking a little bit. And I said, let me finish smudging you, because I didn't want the smudge stick to fall on the floor and burn the floor. Yeah. So I had to finish doing it. And then she goes, what was that? And she said, I felt like something, I felt shaky, like something was coming out of me. So when I read this, that when they were doing the same thing to this woman and something was shaking, I thought about if it was something similar to what my friend went through, because they were summoning things up.
Now with this story, on the flip side, you had professionals who saw the children walk backwards up the wall.
Yeah.
So that was professional people from the outside, not someone in her family who saw and witnessed this happening.
And people who didn't necessarily believe in that.
And the oil excretion down the Venetian blinds in their house, they locked the door, they wiped it off, locked the door, walked back in 23 minutes later, and it was doing it again with no explanation on where it came from. So there's elements of this case that I think there is something there, but I think because something was there, it kind of festered and ate away at the psychoses of everybody who lived there, and the whole family became obsessed with it because they had to live with it. Now, if they had moved, maybe they wouldn't have to deal with it. But because they had to live there and keep living there, it became a norm to be, oh my God, you're possessed. Oh my God, this must be paranormal. Everything that happens is paranormal, when maybe everything wasn't.
But how do you explain the kid going up the wall and that part? You can't explain that.
If it was just her saying my kid did that, I would be skeptical that that's true. But the fact that somebody else from Child Protective Services saw that happen and they were still holding their mother's hand the whole time they did it.
Right.
That's weird.
That is weird.
I would take off out the door. Right
and seeing the child levitate above the bed.
Yeah, but the mother said that.
The mother said that. Yeah.
Again, we don't really know what was what and what was real and wasn't. But the fact that the professionals, like the police officer who went home and that thing was happening in his car, his garage door at home wouldn't work. I mean, the things that just repeatedly happened in sequence after he left the house, and that woman who had so many health problems when she left the house, the case manager. So it's interesting that they're all connected. So there is something there. Everyone is having something in connection to the house.
Right.
But the fact that the other tenants didn't have any issues is interesting.
Yeah. So that's so it made me wonder if it has something to do with what the family was summoning up, or what the family. You know, psychological issues can follow the family, can follow a family, and manifest into something else, because I do feel that psychology and spirit are interconnected.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. So if the family is still around and they're listening to this podcast, if there's something that we don't know that you want to tell us, I'm interested in hearing more about it.
I am too.
Yeah.
Okay, what's interesting about this case, in the end of it, ZAK Bagans of Ghost Adventures, of course, he likes to collect haunted items and things to put in his museum.
Sure.
In this particular case, he purchased the house and he investigated it for, I think, a couple of years. And he made a documentary called Demon House. Mm-hmm. And then he had the house torn down.
Why?
And he said, well, because the case really, really kind of stuck with it when he followed it. And he said, this particular case really screwed him up. He said, he tells viewers at the beginning of the documentary that his declaration comes moments after a warning that reads that demonologists believe that demons can attach themselves to you through other people, objects, and electronic devices. View at your own risk. Bagans claims a physical ailment in connection with the house was a prominent demon. A demon says came to him in his dreams not long after he bought the house in 2014.
Yikes.
He literally bought it a year after it stopped. The demon, a 12-foot tall goat man, supposedly visits ZAK in his dreams and breathes black smoke into his lungs.
Ew.
He said that he still sees the house in his dreams even after he had the house torn down in 2016. I'm not the most normal type of person there is, he says, but I do enjoy having chaos in my life. I do have a little danger in me, a little thrill-seeking, and while something did happen to me physically from the house I still have today, I felt like I went through what other people went through is a part of history. And it just talks about the documentary itself and skeptics. But he says Father Magano admits to a certain amount of tension between himself and ZAK throughout the process. Bagans, a self-characterized adrenaline junkie, didn't take to heart Father Magano's warnings about how dangerous the demons could be. He said, when we first went into the house, I asked for everyone to have some sort of protection before we went in, Father Magano says. All the other cameramen and people that were there had protection, but ZAK didn't want any. He wanted to experience firsthand. That was a little bit of a difficulty because it's dangerous, but he kind of insisted on it. Even though that he didn't get into the documentary, it was a point of contention between us. I was kind of surprised it didn't get into the documentary because he kind of likes to put those things in his things. He doesn't mind showing confrontations, but he left that one out. It's kind of seemed to be a cramp on his style.
It's kind of out of character for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bagans credits the case with opening his eyes to the influence aspect of demon abilities. Despite having never caught anything on camera during his time at the house, Bagan says, I found out that it wasn't about that. It wasn't about the effects it would have on people, demons can have, travel through electronic devices and through the air, and though they're very, very intelligent and faster than our brains can even fathom. The supposed danger associated with demons is still alive. The house is gone, but the grounds are anything but hollowed. The demonic energy still exists, according to the Catholic faith's understanding of how that energy clings to a place and people. Going in unprotected really messed up with Bagans, and it also led to the destruction of the house, which is something I disagreed with, Father Magano says. I think we could have protected a lot more people by owning it, locking it up so people won't mess around with this. Now, that's in an open lot. It is mentioned in the documentary. People are going there doing seances or whatever, and the police get called out to chase people away. Those people are in danger, and there's no way to really protect them. And all are in need of curiosity. Curiosity is always the invitation. So a lot of people are setting themselves up for a dangerous experience.
Well,
it's not
yeah.
like you can walk away and it's over with. That's nice. I mean, once something gets attached, you got to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
This may or may not, they may not know how to deal with that. So it's interesting that, now I don't agree with the priest that you should lock it up so people can't get in there and experience it. Because, if you have a place that exists and it's locked up, people are going to break into it.
Of course they are.
I don't care who you are. And you know what? That's actually worse. Having a seance in an empty house, you could start a fire. It could burn down,
Sure you
burn
can.
the neighborhood down.
Sure.
I think they made a wise choice by probably tearing it down.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if a piece of that house isn't in ZAK's haunted museum in Vegas. I'd be curious to look for that.
if he would even want a piece of that. I mean,
Of
according
course
to
he would. He has Dr. Kevorkian's death
But
fan,
according to him, he's having dreams about it, and he was freaked out, and he kind of doesn't want anything to do with it
but
afterwards.
he says he doesn't regret it.
Okay, well,
So, and trust me, he'll want to. I bet you he has a piece of this house in his museum. If I ever go, I'll have to look for it.
okay. Well,
But it's interesting. I mean, I just wanted to make sure we.
it's
I
interesting.
remembered this case because of the house. When after you mentioned this case, I thought, is that the house that Zach bought?
but isn't it interesting that the family is glad that it's over with, and they don't even want to think about that house, think about that street, but yet other people keep going up and,
Well, it's curiosity.
well, yeah, but
It's curiosity. You're going to want to see it. If that house existed in your city, you'd probably go take a peek too.
maybe.
You would. I know you would.
Okay, all right. Okay, I would.
Don't lie.
I would, but I wouldn't go in the parking lot and start
Doing
doing
seance?
stupid stuff. No, I wouldn't do that.
Maybe a little EVP session
I
on
would
the
be a
sidewalk.
little smarter.
Little EVP session on the sidewalk.
On the sidewalk away from it, sure.
Yeah.
But not going there and doing all kinds of
Plop down and do a
no,
seance.
not in a place like that. No.
All right. So there you go. That's the almonds case. That's interesting.
Very. I
Haunting,
didn't
possessions.
all that I mean, I was researching this case, but I didn't realize it would be that detailed. I really didn't.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm surprised they haven't tried to make a movie of that yet.
They might.
It's true.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, that's another episode. And until next time, we're going to say goodbye.
Bye. See you next time.
Royalty-free, copyright-free music by Kevin MacLeod and Ross Bugden.